Hey guys, so last weekend we tackled our pumpkin dessert for Thanksgiving, and this weekend I'm going to show you how to make one of my favorite fruit pies for Thanksgiving, a pear and almond tart. This is the one dessert that my husband requests every year because it's so delicious. It's also pretty easy to do if you follow a few key steps. So let me show you how to make it. So we're first going to begin by making our crust. So in the bowl of a food processor, you're going to add 1.25 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Go ahead and just pulse that up until everything is combined, and then we're slowly going to add 8 tablespoons of unsalted butter that is nice and chilled. You can go ahead and just add it through the little feed tube, pulsing all the while until you get a nice coarse crumb. At that point, you want to take 1 egg yolk, crack it into a small bowl, and then you're going to add anywhere from 3 to 4 tablespoons of icy water. So start with 3 tablespoons. If it's not coming together after that, add another tablespoon until you start to see a nice dough form. And if for some reason your dough ends up too sticky, just add a tablespoon more of flour. It's really that delicate balance between water and flour at this stage, but you do want to end up with a nice dough ball. At that point, we're going to form it into a round mound, press it into a disc, and wrap it up in some parchment paper. You do want to refrigerate your dough at least an hour ahead of time because that's really going to prevent the dough from shrinking once it bakes. Or the better thing to do really is make it the day before. It'll be perfectly fine in your fridge and then you won't have to wait around. Now for this tart, it's really critical, I say, to have a removable bottom tart tin. They're pretty affordable, you can find them online. I'll leave you a link in the description to some of my favorite brands. What's nice about it is that the bottom is removable so that when you go to release your tart, you will get a beautiful fluted edge. Once your dough is ready to go, you're gonna roll it out to about 1/4 inch thick, pop it in your tart tin. Then, all of the edges that flop over the side, you want to flip them in towards the tart, and this will allow us to create a double crust. And this will also add great structure to your tart and give it a little bit more stability as it bakes. Then you can take the palm of your hand and press it into the tin, just making sure that it's nice and snug, working your way all around the perimeter. And then you can go ahead and trim off the additional excess. So you just want to make sure that all of the dough is really flush and that you don't have any cracks, because it will bake that way. So now's the time to make it all perfect. And then you want to pop it in your freezer while you make the filling. And this is kind of a critical step because if you don't pop it in the freezer and it hits that hot oven, it's going to get all misshapen and kind of warp a little bit. So if you want those beautiful edges that show that really pretty fluting, putting it in the freezer is the way to go. Then in the bowl of an electric mixer, you're going to add 7 ounces of almond paste. And then you're also going to add a stick of butter, 8 tablespoons, and 1/4 cup of sugar. Go ahead and just beat that up until it's nice and fluffy. And then you're going to add 2 eggs, 1 at a time, scraping down the bowl in between each addition. Then I also like to add 1 teaspoon of almond extract. Now make sure you get the pure almond extract because you'll get a much better pure almond flavor that way. Sometimes you can see it and it's labeled imitation, not as good. And then you're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and then we're going to add 1/3 cup of flour, and you can mix that in. Then your filling is ready to go. You can go ahead and remove that tart tin, spoon it out into the center of the tin, and then with a spatula, just go ahead and sort of smooth it out, making sure you have a nice even layer. So here's my one tip when it comes to the pears. Don't use the fresh pears. I find that they're too firm and that they won't actually cook through once your pastry is done. So you'll end up with a beautiful golden pastry, but then pears that are really hard in the center. If you use the pears that come in the jar, they're soft and are perfectly done when your pastry is done. Also, it saves you a ton of time because you don't have to peel them or cut them. So you're gonna place your pear halves all the way around the tin. You want the point facing in and make sure you spread them out. You actually don't want them touching because that filling is going to puff up a bit. And if they're touching, it doesn't allow for room for that to actually happen. So make sure you give it about 1/4 inch or so. And then depending on the size of pear that you're using, you may have room in the center and you can pop in a little pear in the center too if you desire. Then we are going to place our tart in a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for anywhere from 40 to 45 minutes. You'll know that it's done when that pastry is nice and golden brown and the filling is puffed up. And then the finishing touch is to take some apple jelly, or any kind of jelly that's clear, microwave it for just about 30 seconds until it's nice and liquefied, and then you're gonna brush the top of each pear. And that will give it a beautiful shine. And then you also wanna add a tablespoon of sliced almonds. You can go ahead and just sprinkle those all over the top. And then the final ta-da moment is to release it from the tin and place it on your cake stand. And you will see you will have one beautiful looking tart that is perfect for Thanksgiving. I love this recipe because it's so beautiful and delicious. You have those soft pears mixed with that delicious almond filling and that crisp homemade pastry crust, which cannot be beat. All right, you guys, I wish you the best of luck as we head into the final stretch before Thanksgiving. I will see you back here on Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving, to share with you one of my favorite muffin ideas for the occasion, a cranberry walnut muffin. It's the perfect thing to serve right before you head into the Thanksgiving feast. All right, you guys, I'll see you then. Bye.